Be jumping into lesson 2-2, the tempo of teaching. Some learning outcomes we're going to be talking about today are going to be the ability to focus and maintain a consistent lesson pace to maximize student learning. Start off with getting focused. You really want to begin lessons with a basic overview of the student. It's going to be beneficial for you and your students. You want to discuss topics such as goals to the lesson, if it's a multiple lesson series, discussing progress on your goals so far, the exact topic of that lesson, and relating it back to previous lessons as well, and certain focal points you're trying to get focused on. Starting and sustaining flow. So really you want to make sure that you have basically a momentum going throughout your lesson. People talk about lessons kind of being like alive, almost like people are always like, people that are not even golfers can watch and say there's a little bit of like vitality to it. It's going through, it's a little bit of heartbeat, there's momentum, there's give and take, there's rhythm almost to the lesson. Things are getting along, moving smoothly in a well-taught lesson, that is. You want to make sure you grab their attention. You can't lack enthusiasm. As an instructor, you'll lose. It can be almost disastrous to a lesson if you're seeing kind of uninspired, going through the motions. Students are going to sit there and think that it's kind of like, oh, why did I eat this lesson? I'm wasting money, I'm wasting my time. Rather, you want to capture their attention by being very enthusiastic, showing a lot of curiosity and excitement towards getting them better and improving their game. Developing an interactive lesson climate. So you want to be able to develop an area where it's interactive. It's not just you talking, it's going to be kind of communication back and forth. And to do that, you want to make sure you're asking questions with the student. Ideally, you want to start with simple yes or no questions, and then slowly throughout the lesson progress into more detailed and in-depth questions towards what you're doing. And you never want to give students questions that they don't know the answer to, or if you do that, not doing it too often. You want them to remain confident. No one wants to sit there and answer questions that make them feel dumb or not knowledgeable at all. It will actually not encourage them at all to answer questions. They'll probably shut down a little bit. So asking them questions that are simple at first, then adding more detail and making sure it's possible to answer, then they'll at least be able to know the answers to the questions as well to help develop learning. See and support the right stuff. You want to make sure that you're praising certain students correctly and the amount of it as well. Most people respond better when their success is praised. They become more motivated. They want to do better as well. They want to keep that feeling. You gotta be careful not to overpraise students. Too much praise can sometimes feel like kind of a lot of beginning instructors will show that they will praise on too many shots, especially when the student is starting to realize, oh, he's really just praising on everything rather than specific, like, hey, this is actually really good. And but also you want to have a balance of positive and negatives. Yes, you definitely want to be praising them more than we're tearing them down, but there's certain things and certain times where you have to be negative about what they're doing, so they can be aware of what's going wrong, and then be positive when they actually make the correct change. Keeping it flowing. Good lessons are, they're fun and engaging to watch, and they're fun and engaging to be in. You want to make sure as an instructor you're bringing energy into the lesson, and you want to make sure you're remaining active with a student rather than simply sitting back and watching them, just mumbling a few things back and forth with them. You want to be actively involved in their learning, whether it's physically involved, verbally. You just want to make sure you're ready to go with them and providing energy into the lesson. Active teachers and dynamic learners. It's proven that students are more successful when they are being interacted with, like, the teachers during a golf lesson, versus just simply observing them while they do individual work. When we're hands-on and with them and constantly in action and giving them information, offering support, and like just kind of nursing along the learning process, their level of learning, amount of learning, and skill improvement is going to be vastly greater than just sitting there and observing and giving small amounts of information and small amounts of support rather than being actively involved. And also, to create a dynamic learning environment, you want to make sure that the student is not only physically you're not only engaged physically with the student, but also mentally. So once again, like earlier, asking questions can also be a process that really encourages proper learning. Brisk pace of lesson activities. So having a brisk pace of lesson activities promotes good flow. Um, the lesson's kind of like bogged down with repetitive drills, not really a lot of flavor, you could say, to the lesson, not a lot of variety. A lot of times that can really turn an enjoyable lesson of learning and getting better into kind of a chore for students. So you really want to make sure that the lessons are time efficient, and that as an instructor you're making sure that if all your activities are to be time efficient and moving throughout in different areas. So you want to just do one drill for a little while that the student enjoys, then move to the next one, and all these are still building on the fundamental concepts of the lesson, but you still want to make sure that things are going forward at an efficient pace. You want to keep students engaged. So you want to take less time on a lesson, because usually it's about an hour lesson, sometimes two. You want to take less time from the student in the beginning of just talking about organizing and planning the lesson too much in the early part of the lesson. You want to make sure that you are using more of the time to appropriately practice the skill with a student. This, first of all, promotes better lesson flow when you're more hands-on the entire time and actually working on a skill. And it's a little better it's easier to achieve the goal that you're going through the lesson when you actually have more time practicing the skill. Simple as that. If you waste time talking too much about planning and the organization of the lesson, you're going to be losing time where the student can actually physically be practicing the skill. The spice of life, interesting name. You want to avoid falling into too much of a routine. There is certain points that an instructor can have a routine to start lessons, and that can be very efficient and timely. But as time goes on, there is a tendency that we as humans and teachers your routine will become too dry and too every day too bland, and it can actually take away from your actual enthusiasm, because you become a robot almost. Even though you are excited for the lesson, it can take away from that. So you want to try new things to kind of give a different feel to the lesson or a different energy. The book suggested some crazy things like like having music on when you are teaching, but really the realistic ones are kind of maybe try changing in different drills, try a different approach to the way you verbally explain things. Just try to mix it up a little bit so it doesn't become this a Monday through Friday kind of feel. This is what I'm going to do each time. Make it more individualized, kind of branch out with different ideas as well, experiment. You can make things a little bit better with lesson flow as well. Timing is everything. You have to know when to make changes. Inexperienced teachers focus too much on students' interest and enjoyment, and they're too scared to make changes. They wait too long. By then it's too late, or they're in too deep. They can't make the change. Experienced teachers focus more on performance cues and skill performance. They anticipate possible need for change, which is the biggest difference between an experienced and experienced teacher in that area. Is they're anticipating and waiting for it to happen, and they're also more comfortable with making changes. They're not too scared of it. They're confident in their abilities. They know they're going to make a smooth transition to it, and continue to have the student improve. Whether an inexperienced teacher can kind of be too nervous that they might lose the student's confidence, or they might not be able to smoothly transition. They're not confident themselves even, but experienced teachers can be able to anticipate those needs and be comfortable making those changes. And there we go, making transitions smoothly. Once a decision is made to make a change, it is important that it cannot disrupt the lesson's flow. If it does, it can really be disastrous towards the lesson. Changes that are made must be stated clearly and made quickly. You have to be very precise and clear on what you're telling the student. Hey, we're going to make a change. We're going to go to this, whether it's changing a drill, changing an actual fundamental of their swing. Whatever it is, it needs to be very clear to the student what's going on, and it needs to be done quickly so you don't lose, first of all, time in the lesson, but you don't lose flow. Briefing in the beginning of the lesson so the student knows the overall goal and what you're planning to work on can help in the situation with making it smoother in the transition, because they still know the overall goal. So now you're just changing a little bit how we get there, but the still overall goal is the same. So that can make things go a little smoothly as well, a little more smooth. Expecting success. Great instructors get results because they expect them. When the expectations are high, it's shown that people kind of rise with the challenge. It's a little bit motivating for the student because someone believes in them. Someone thinks that they should be able to achieve a higher level. So that's both positive in terms of motivation and just inspiration. They're ready to go. They actually have more self-belief. It boosts the learning environment tremendously because their confidence levels go up, their willingness to learn goes up. A lot of things go up that allow for better learning. And then, but you have to be careful that expectations must vary from student to student. So the expectations for one player in a certain area of the game will obviously not relate to the other. If you have a 2 handicap or a scratch golfer, and then you try to have the same expectations for someone that's a 10 handicap or a 12 handicap, obviously you want to change them. But a lot of times we can find ourselves falling in the traps with that. Even players at the same level, the expectations in certain areas of their game may be different, so we have to vary that student to student. You want to avoid momentum blockers. We have to be able to recognize them first and foremost. You want to avoid things that would basically direct attention away from the student. You can lose that student's interest very quickly or their confidence in you. You want to avoid directing it towards other things as well, such as like quality of teaching equipment, the temperature outside, or even leaving them alone for a moment to grab different equipment. A lot of momentum blockers can be avoided with proper planning and making sure we have the right equipment around, extra backup golf balls if needed, all our training aids close and on hand, so if we do need it, we can just grab it right there. We don't have to leave the area, and that takes away from momentum, especially if you leave the teaching area. It's going to look bad on your part as an instructor, and it's going to really derail the lesson. And bringing it to a close. A good close comes to a memorable and purposeful conclusion. You want to make sure you maintain the level of enthusiasm you had at the beginning of the lesson and the middle of the lesson. You want to keep it going throughout. You want to make sure that we're going over things with the student that we talked about throughout the entire lesson, whether it's key topics, certain swing thoughts. You want to make sure you're moving through it, but really you want to make sure that it's memorable and purposeful. You have to be closing with a purpose, having an exact agenda, and then really making sure that the student is able to remember what's going on. Final remembrance. Students often remember the most of like the last thing they did in the lesson. So good instructors really like to end the lesson on a strong, memorable close, and they like to cover the most important aspects when they're having their final discussion. So if there was an overall goal of achieving something, and 1 or 2 thoughts or 1 or 2 drills really got them to that point, that's what they want to discuss with that student. They want to make sure that they're really focusing on those key points. And also, if they're hitting a final golf shot, you really want to make sure it's a good one, and then a positive note. We've all seen range balls. You have 4 or 5 range balls left. You stripe that third to last. You probably heard someone say, end on that one. Whether it be in a lesson or it's a warm-up session or even practice. And that's true when it comes to finishing a lesson. You want to make sure the student's ending on a positive note. And then finally, trailers and teasers. A great way to help finish and close a lesson is to kind of give a teaser or a preview to what the next lesson will be. An example of that would be something that you, let's say you worked on something in a short game, and you said, hey, we'll build on this next lesson, and hopefully we will improve it fully, which will add more and more, kind of a stepping stone ladder kind of thing. It will draw their interest, motivate them to practice, so they'll be ready for next time to develop even more. Or you say something like, hey, we've got this down, but next lesson we're going to talk more about, like, hey, how are we going to use it in the golf course? What situations are best to use this and manage it around the course? Those are simple things that can really motivate a student's learning and motivate them to practice as well.